So today's webinar is going to last exactly 1 hour, but we'll reserve about 45 minutes towards the end of the webinar, sorry, 15 minutes for questions towards the end of the webinar. But whenever you do see something that Marc-André is doing that might be interesting to you, please type in your questions into the sidebar, and we'll try to answer them as we go along. So as most of you know today, the webinar is about special effects and compositing in Harmony 12. Marc-André will do an overview of certain special effects, and of course we'll go into different scenes, and we'll show you special effects with fire and turbulence, and then we'll do some overviews with scene planning and things like that. Just also so you guys know, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll have it online within the next couple days at toonboom/webinars. So toonboom.com/webinars. If you guys have any questions, like we said, please just drop them in, and hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
All right, so thank you. Thank you, Daisy, for the introduction. So I'm going to go through, going to show you today how you can use Harmony to do compositing and special effects, and how having one tool to do everything from your assets to your animation to the effects can really simplify your pipeline and make your production more efficient. I'll be using just one scene, and I'll try to build full scene. Well, actually, the animation will already be done, but I will add some effects to the scene, and we'll build on that one scene to show you how you can do that in real time. So as Desi said, if at any point you have any questions on anything that I do, don't hesitate to type your questions, and Desi will pass those questions to me. So let me start Harmony here. I'll be working offline, and I'll be using Harmony Premium. Some of the stuff that I'm going to show you can be done in Harmony Essentials and Harmony Advanced. Other stuff requires Premium to do, and I'll try to point those out as I go. I'll be opening a project. So this is something that was exported out of Storyboard Pro. So I have my animatic already imported inside the project here. So when you export a scene out of Storyboard Pro to Harmony, what it does is, well, there's multiple ways of exporting. There's two methods. You can export the animatic, like I did for this one here, or you can export the original assets. Most of the production that are using, let's say, cutout animation, puppet animation, will use the animatic as a reference when they're animating the scene. And but if you're doing more paperless, traditional animation drawn in the software, you might want to reuse the assets from Storyboard Pro. So when Storyboard Pro creates the Harmony scene, it puts in the animatic in, it puts the camera in. I remove the camera because I want to redo the camera move. I want to show you that as I go. And it also sets the length of the scene. If you have sound in your storyboard, it will also put the sound in, but I didn't have any sound in this one, so there's no sound in my scene. All right, so I have my animatic. If I play it back, this is what it looks like. So this is kind of an orc walking and moving his torch around. So I will build my scene as a setup crew would be doing. So I have some templates in my compositing library here under the FX folder. So I've got all the assets that I need here in my library. I'll start by bringing in the character, so the orc. When I bring in a template, I can bring it in to the camera view. So if I drag it and drop it from the library to the camera view, this will import the assets, and it will connect them automatically inside my node view. So if I'm using Essentials or Advanced, I will drag and drop stuff in my camera view. I can also drag and drop stuff in the timeline if I want to choose the order, or if I want to attach this to something in my timeline. Personally, I prefer always dragging and dropping things directly into my node view because I'm using Premium, and this gives me control of where I will place the stuff in my node view. So I've imported a character. The character is already animated. I won't be going through the animation today, but he's missing some pieces. He's missing the staff, and the background is missing. So I'll bring in the background. Is that the right one? I make two. Let me change the view here. I want to go to list mode. got the swamp, so I'm bringing in my swamp. There we go, and I will connect this to my composite. So how the node view works is that you have the nodes, which are different things in your scene. They can be pegs if you want to animate, move around, scale, rotate your assets. And you have the animated layers, the drawing layers. And each of those nodes, they all have a port at the top and a port at the bottom. They may have more than 1 or 2 ports on them, depending on what they do. But the way it works, the flow is that it always goes from top to bottom. So it goes into a node and comes out. So this is a peg node. This peg gives the information about the position. So if I, for example, if I take the peg node from my orc and I take my translate tool, I can move my orc around, or I can rotate him, the whole thing, or I can scale him up or down. So this is what the peg would do. So the peg passes the information of position to another peg, and then this peg passes the information to my group here, and then passes the information to my character. My character is inside that group, so this is the character. I won't go through how to animate or how to build the character today, but this is the very advanced cutout character. And you can see that everything comes in and then goes out at the bottom here of the group into the multi-port out. So I go out of the group, and so the image goes down and into my composite. The composite in my network allows me to take multiple images and combine them together. So for example, I've got my animatic, I've got my forest that's behind my animatic, and I've got my orc, and these 3 are composited together. And the order of the cables can be important in determining the order of compositing. So if 2 assets have the same Z depth, because we also composite using the Z depth, if they have the same Z value, the same Z depth, the order of the cables on the composite will determine the order of compositing. Now, what I'll do before going any further is I'll move my animatic all the way to the left because I want this to be at the top. But I also will reduce my animatic, put it in a corner, so I just use it as a reference. So with my animatic layer selected, either in my timeline or my node in my node view, I will add a peg to it. So I can just click the add peg button right here. And this connects a peg at the top of the animatic. I can do this from the timeline, which you would do if you were using Essentials Advanced, or I can do this from the node view. From here on, I will always do that from the node view because I want to control where the peg appears. I just did that to show you it was also possible from the timeline. So now I have a peg at the top of my my animatic. I will take my transform tool, and using the transform tool and removing the animation mode, I will scale down and move my reference animatic to the top corner here. And now I'm able to go through my scene, see my animatic in reference at the top, and see that the animator did a really good job at replicating what was in the corner. I still don't have a camera move inside my scene. I'll do that a little bit later. Now I'm still missing a couple of things on my character. He has a torch or a staff in the animatic, and he has a flame on it. So I'll bring in my staff. So I have another template here, staff template. I'll drag this to my node view. And I'll connect this to my composite at the bottom right here. And you can see that right now my staff doesn't have the proper position inside the camera view. I want my staff to follow the hand of the orc inside the scene. So I'll need to attach somehow the staff to the hand of my character. So what I'll do is I'll find the node for the hand inside the node view. And since the character is really, really big, it can be difficult to find it. So the easiest way to find it is you select the element, the drawing you want to find in your node view. You go in the node view here and you press the O key. And when pressing the O key, this will show you that node inside the node view. So what I want to use here, I actually want to use the position of my hand. So I'll use the position information that's on the peg above my hand. And I want to make a cable go out from this peg here out of my group. So what I'll do is I'll just click on the small port at the bottom of the peg, just a click. This selects the port, and then I will go down to the Alt port of my group. So I press spacebar and I just pan the view around to reach the multi-port out. And now if I'm pressing Control or Command on the Mac and I click on the port here, the multi-port out, this will create a cable from the hand, from the peg of the hand to the multi-port out. And now if I go back to the top, I have an extra port coming out from the group. And I will be able to connect that to the staff. Now the staff will be following my character, the hand of my character, everywhere it goes. Now I do have a little issue here with the displaying of the hand and the staff. The staff is drawn before the hand, in front of the hand, and I want the hand, well, part of the hand to be in front of the staff and part of the hand to be behind. Just the fingers that are grabbing the staff, they should be in front. If I try to change that by changing the order of the cables on my composite, it will move the whole staff in front or behind. I don't want to do that. I could maybe take the fingers here and move them forward like this, but the fingers are not separated on this character, so it moves the whole hand. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use a cutter or a mask to cut the hand through the staff. So again, we'll need to pull a cable out from my orc group and use a cutter to cut through the staff. So I select my hand, I go in my node view, and you see that when I move my mouse, the focus changes from the camera view, where I have a red frame around the view, to the node view. I don't have to click in the view to give it focus because I enabled a preference called focus on mouse enter. And this is really, really useful when you want to work really fast in between the camera and the node view. So I've selected the hand, I go in the node view, I press O, and this shows me the hand again inside my my character here. So I'll select the bottom port from the hand, just click the port right here, and you need to click and not drag. And when I'm using my Wacom tablet, sometimes it's difficult. So with the port selected, I press Command on my Mac and click the port here. This will draw a cable between the two. And now I'll exit the group. And now I see I have an extra port right here. So now what I want to do, I want to use that and cut the hand out of the staff. So I'll need to use a cutter. To do that, I'll use a node library. Now, by default, you might not have the node library in your workspace. So if you want to add the node library to your workspace, I usually add it at the bottom because I like to have a lot of space. And you need to add it to a port where you don't have the node view because you'll be dragging nodes from the node library to the node view. So at the bottom here, I click the plus sign next to timeline, and I'll select node library. In the node library, I'll see all the nodes that are available for me to build my compositing tree. What I'm looking for is called a cutter. So I can just type cutter here in the search field, and it will show me all the nodes that have cutter in their name. I'll click and drag this into my scene. And you'll see that this node has 2 ports at the top, unlike the other nodes that we've seen so far. So the left port is the port for the image you want to affect by this effect. So this is the image I want to cut. And the left port will be the image I want to use to cut my, my staff. So now I will take my cutter and I will connect this to my staff to the right port of the cutter. We'll connect my cutter here. My staff shows because I'm not using anything to cut it right now. Then I'll pull a cable from my hand that's coming out of the group into the left port of the cutter. And now you can see that I see my staff because the staff is now being cut by the hand. And if I just, to show you what really happens, if I just take my display, so my display here at the bottom gathers all the information and shows it to me in my camera view here, because this is the display that's selected inside my list. Now I'll take the display, I'll press Alt and hold it, and I'll rip it off, and I'll connect it under the cutter. And you can see now, I see that the staff is cut by the hand. If I remove the hand right here, you see the full staff. You don't see it anymore. I'll move my display back there. And now I have the staff properly displayed for the whole duration of my scene. The next thing I'll need to do is add fire to that staff because it's kind of a torch here. It's burning. So I have a fire cycle that's been drawn already that I will be able to reuse for that for that scene. So I'll drag that template into my scene, into my node view right here. So this is a fire cycle. I'll need to connect this to my composite at the bottom. And now I see the fire inside my camera view. And you can see the fire burning. But now I need the fire to follow my staff around. So I'll just connect the staff peg. Maybe I'll move this up a little bit. Connect the staff peg to the fire right there. Now clean this up a little bit. And now I have fire following the staff around. I'm not so sure if the fire should be displayed above or below the staff. I'll just leave it like that for now. Now it's really an animated fire. If we look at it here, it's been drawn this way, and I want to add a little bit of effect, of the glow effect on the fire, a little bit of transparency. So I'll use some effects from my node library to do that. Let me move my animatic away from here. Let's go in the node library. And I'll use, the first thing that I'll do is actually, I'll show you the fire. So the drawing of the fire, if I go in the drawing view here, so this shows me just that single drawing. I don't see everything else in my scene. And you can see here that on my right-hand side of the view, I have a toolbar that shows me different icons here for the different art layers. So drawings inside Harmony can have up to 4 art layers. By default, you can only see 2. You'll need to enable a preference to be able to see the 4. And I'll just go into preferences right now to show you where to do that. Harmony preferences. If you're running on Windows, the preferences would be under Edit. Under Mac, it's under Harmony Premium preferences. And I'll go in the Advanced tab. And I need to check the support overlay and underlay arts. Now, other preferences that I like to turn on when I'm doing compositing is the advanced display. So this gives me the choice of having a display list per view instead of having a display for the whole interface. Advanced palette list, this is also good to be able to see the palettes from everywhere. I talked a lot more about the palettes in my previous webinar last week, so if you have questions about palettes, you can go and watch that webinar. It's posted on our website under toonboom.com/webinar. Now, other preferences that I like to enable, the one I was talking about earlier was focus on mouse center. So under the general tab, I make sure I have focus on mouse center here. And another one that I've enabled is called, where's that one again? Display cardinal coordinates. Actually, I've disabled this one. So I'll enable it just to show you. Actually, I won't. But when you're doing animation, working on traditional animation, the coordinate system uses north, south, east, and west. And for people that are not familiar with animation, this can be a little bit confusing. And actually, it makes it kind of easier to type a minus instead of typing a W for west, and a minus instead of typing a S for south when you're on the y-axis. So I'll just uncheck that and click OK. So now I'm back in my drawing view with my fire drawing here. And you can see that on my line art, I have these flames. And if I go on my overlay art, I have these flames as well. And if I turn on the preview, you can see both of them together. So these were drawn on separate layers. To art layers to be able to do effects individually on them. So I'll go back to my camera view here and inside my node view, and I'll start by adding a layer selector. So it's called Selector. It's called Layer Selector, and I'll pull this into my node view. I'll connect this on the cable here. Instead of pulling a cable from the fire cycle to here and from here to the composite, if I drag the node and I hold the Alt key, this will connect the node on the cable directly. Now you can see that as soon as I added it, the orange flame disappeared from the fire. This is because right now it's set to read only the line art and the color art. So I'll rename this one Layer Selector LS Line Art LA. And then I'll pull another one in. and I'll have this time to actually draw a cable. But I don't want to go all the way to the bottom composite here, so I'll add another composite in my scene. So I press Control H. It's Control H on Windows, and it's Control H on Mac as well. And I'll pull these cables to here. I'll remove this one, and I'll go back to my composite right here. So now I have two layer selector. The left one I'll use to display just the overlay. So I'll uncheck the other one. So layer selector, OL for overlay. And if I disconnect this one, you see I have just the overlay from this one and just the line art from this one. So I'm ready to add a little bit of glow here. So I'll go back to my node library, glow. I'll bring in the glow effect. I'll connect it on the cable using Alt. And I'll pull in another one and connect it to here. And now I'll be, if I just pull in the glow and I just render this scene right there, you'll see it's kind of boring. Doesn't really look like fire. It more like looks like my fire was extinguished, just like smoke. So the first thing I'll do is on the big flame here, I'll open the glow, and I switch between OpenGL mode and software render by clicking on these little buttons at the bottom here. So it's a little flower. The colored flower is the render view. So this is a software render. This is exactly how the scene would look like if I export this out of Harmony. And I leave this open, and I'll open the glow here. I'll click on the little yellow button there to open the glow. And I'll start by clicking the Use Source Color. So this will use the color of the actual artwork instead of having me to specify a color at the bottom here. So the options that I have here are type of blur, either a radial blur or a directional blur. Let's say I do a blur of 10. So that's a little bit too soft. It's a directional radial blur right there. A radius of 2, or maybe, yeah, that will be good. For the outer flame, I could invert the matte. This would do the glow on the rest of the scene instead of doing it just on that glow. I could have a multiplicative to have a different kind of effect. Just uncheck that. On the other one, I'll go and actually I'll leave the gray color. I won't change the color. I will change the value here to have a little bit softer. So now I have kind of two colors. But for me, that's not enough. I need to add a little bit more effects. But before I do that, I'm running out of room here. So I'll select these effects modules, nodes. I'll create a group to continue working on those. So to create a group, after I've selected them, I can right-click, go in the group menu, and select group selection, or press Command-G or Control-G on your keyboard. So right here, I have the group. I'll call this the Flame FX. Go. I'll go inside the group. I can go inside the group by clicking on the arrow on the right or by shift-clicking the node. And now I have just that effect here, so it's a lot easier to work with. I'm not cluttered with the rest. Now I want to add a little bit of matte. I want to add a third glow here. So I'll use a matte resize to shrink the outer flame a little bit. The matte resize, I'll put a minus maybe 1 to shrink it a little bit, and I'll use a glow and connect it here. And actually, it's not so bad. To maybe a little bit softer, something like this. And now I think my fire looks pretty good. Maybe it's a little bit pale, but it's pretty happy with what I have. This is what it would look like in OpenGL, and if you look in software render, this is how the flame looks. I hope everything is good so far. Any questions so far?
We do. We have a couple questions. So one of them is coming from Luis most recently, and he's asking, hi, is there any particular advantage to using the layer selector module instead of the overlay and line art module to separate the art layers?
Hold on. Actually, if I go in my node library here, I have a module called line art, which would be the same as putting the layer selector to just line art like this. And maybe if I look for art, that would be faster. I also have a color art node, but I don't have an overlay and I don't have an underlay art selector. So for these two, I need to use the layer selector. And I like to use the layer selector because if ever you change your mind, you don't want to read a overlay, you want to read a line art, you can just change it from here, right? If I'm using the other one, just the art one, I will need to change the node completely to be able to select another art. So this is the reason why I'm using the line art, the art selector, the layer selector module node instead of using the line art or color art node.
Cool. Kevin was also asking a little bit earlier. He's like, are all the effects available from the start, or do you need to download them?
So all the effects that I've used so far are available directly into Harmony Premium. If you're using Essentials, you have less, I think it's about 10 effects. I can't remember exactly by heart, 10, 12. Yes. But you all need to control them directly through the timeline. And if you're using Advanced, there's a little bit more effects. And you also need to control them from the timeline. There's no node view. But all the effects so far that I used, and if I go in my node library, maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. All the effects that you see here, not all of them that you see here, because I have some extra plugins, but all the effects that I've been using so far, they're all built in. Now I have two categories here that are not built into the software, and these are actually OpenFX plugins. So I'm using the Sapphire plugins from GenArts, which are really good. They have over 200 effects. These are in the OpenFX architecture, and they are available from GenArts. And since they are using OpenFX architecture, they can be used in Nuke, they can be used in Harmony. So if you buy them from GenArts, you're able to use them on any of those software at the same time. And I also have some from Revision FX. These are the real smart blur effects that are also coded in OpenFX. But everything else inside the my library here is built in the software. All right, so now I have my flame burning and I have my character walking. Now the thing I want to do is I want to actually add some kind of flicker light on the character. And to do this, I'll actually use a highlight node, highlight right here. And the highlight, the way it works is you need to use a matte to specify which area of the character you want to highlight. And instead of drawing a matte for every frame of animation, I'll actually use a copy of my character that I will offset using a peg. So I'm using an apply image transformation node here. And I'll also be needing a peg, but I'll add a peg using a shortcut. So the highlight, like the cutter tool, has two ports. The image port, which is the port that you want the image to be affected with by, and the left one is the matte, so the image that you're going to use to apply the effect on. So I will connect this directly onto my orc here, and then I will use a copy. So I'll drag another cable, copy of my orc, like this. But then I need to offset this copy because now they're displayed one on top of the other. I'll use a shortcut, Control P, to add a peg to my scene. And I'll use this peg here to offset, make sure I'm at the start of my scene, to offset the character. So now I have a copy of my character that I can move around. And you see that since it's going through the highlight module, the highlight node, it's restricted to the shape of my character. So I'll just offset it like this, a little bit. And now if I look at this in OpenGL or in software render, you'll see that it's actually doing a highlight on the whole character and not on the edge. I want the reverse. So I'll go into my highlight module, my highlight node, and I have a box here called Invert Matte. I'll click that, and this will reverse the matte, so it will do the effect outside of the matte instead of inside. And I can change the blur radius, make it bigger a little bit, 5, make it softer, and also change the color to have it like maybe orange because it's coming from the fire, like this. Now, as I'm doing this, I realize that my character is the colors on my character are pretty strong. He's in the forest, it's dark, so I need to darken the colors a little bit. So I'll go into my color view, and I'll find my orc palette right here. So I have two versions of my palette. I've made a clone of the palette, and I've tinted the palette so that the palette is, the character is darker. So I'll take this palette and I'll move it up in the hierarchy. I'll put it at the top. So I'm sure that this is the palette that is used. So now my character is darker and he's being lit by the flame. If I do a software render of this, this is how it looks like. And now, since this is a flame, I want the light to flicker on my character, right? So I'll add a little bit of randomness on the offset on my peg. There's two ways of doing this. Either I do it directly on the peg, or I can also use a Quake module, a Quake node. I'll start by just using the peg here. So on the peg, I need to make sure I want to find my peg in my timeline. So I select the peg in the node view. I go to my timeline, I press O. This focuses on the node. I'll click here and I'll add a keyframe. I need to add a keyframe to be able to see the functions in the X sheet. So now I'll go to the X sheet. I make sure I have my X sheet toolbar displayed at the top. If you don't have it, you can just right click and select X sheet view. And in this view, in this toolbar, I have the second button here called show column list. I click this and this will show me an extra column or an extra pane here, which I made way too big. And now when I select my peg, I will be able to see all the timing information on my peg from here. So now I want to do a randomness on the x-axis of my peg. And you see I moved it west, so it's minus 0.07. So I'll select the whole column by clicking the header. I'll right-click the cells. I'll go in the exposure menu and select fill cells randomly. And I'll need to specify what is the minimum value, what is the maximum value. So maybe -1 as a minimum and -0.3 for a maximum value. And I can specify a hold. Since my flame is animated on 2s, there's a drawing every 2 frame. I also want my flicker to be animated on 2. So I put a hold of 2. I click apply, and this will populate my x-axis for my peg with these values. And you can see that the value changes every 2 frame. If I want to use whole numbers, I can. If I want to add key exposures after, I have the options of doing that right here. So now I can close this. I'll go back to my camera view. And if I go through, you'll see that now the light is flickering on my character. But my character is turning around and I need to, now he's being lit by the back, but the torch is in front, so I'll need to fix that. So I'll just go to the frame where he flips. I'll go back to my X sheet. So this is frame 58, so I'll select frame 58, scroll down, shift click at the bottom, and I'll do again exposure, fill cells randomly, and I'll remove the minus, and I'll click apply. Now, stupidly, I didn't put the right values at the right place. I put the maximum value in the minimum field and the minimum value in the maximum field, but the software was smarter than me and told me, hey, you inverted the values, so I've corrected that for you. Thank you very much. Close. I go back to my camera view, and now I have the light flickering at the proper side of my character. Cool. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to add a camera movement to my scene, as I have one inside the animatics that I see in the corner. I've already laid out the scene, so if I go in my top view here, you can already see that my background is at the back here, is not at Z0, it's backwards, and my character is right here. I'll go back to my camera view. So once I will add my camera move, so I'll add a camera from the timeline here, right here, and the camera is added right in the middle of my node view, so I'll move it here. I'll press Control P, it adds a peg to my camera automatically. And now I'll, from the first frame with animation mode enabled, I'll move my camera left. And you see that when I move the camera, the background and the character, they don't move at the same speed. That's because they don't have the same Z depth. So I'll move the camera here. I'll go forward. I want to follow my character, maybe all the way to here, like this. And then my character is startled and looks back. So what is he looking at? So now I'll freeze the animation by adding a keyframe at frame 45, or maybe a little bit farther. I'll move my keyframe farther here, and he will turn back, and the camera will try to show what he's looking at, what he heard. So if I play this back, I don't know how fast this shows through the webinar. It's pretty good, but it's not snappy enough, so I'll just make the animation a bit shorter. Actually, I'll add some ease in and ease out. So on the keyframe here for my animation for this portion, I'll select the camera peg, and I'll add a small ease in here. And also I'll do the same thing here by using the preset menu. Now if I play this back, the camera move is a little bit more snappy. All right, now what is the character looking at? This is the big question. So I'll be bringing in a couple of other things here. Actually, let me just get rid of the animatic. I don't need it anymore. You can see that the animatic is not following the camera, but if I just connect it to the camera, it will follow the camera everywhere. But I don't need it, so I'll just disable it by selecting it and pressing the D key on my keyboard. All right, so now I want to add some branches. So I have a couple of branches that's been drawn. I'll connect this here. And I'll just move those. They're all in the middle. So I'll just move those on the side. So if I select just this one branch here, move it on the side, this one, I think position is pretty good for this one. And this one here in the middle. But I also want to move them on the Z-axis. So if I go in my side view, I'll just add a side view here at the bottom so I can see my side view and see the camera view at the same time. If I move this on the Z-axis, oops, I unselected it by accident. You'll see that it actually shrinks and becomes bigger when I move it forward or backward because it's going closer or farther from the camera. I don't want this. I want the branch to preserve its size when I'm moving it backwards. So I'll use the maintain size tool right here. And the maintain size tool only allows you to move things forward and backward. And I'll move this backward a little bit. And you'll see that when I'm moving it, it stays the same size. And it actually, if I zoom out, you can see that it's growing or shrinking as I move it forward or backward. There we go, like that. So now I added a little bit of depth to my scene. Let me turn on he has a branch in his face. Actually, they're all displayed at the front, in front of him, even though there are different Z depth. That's because inside the group here I have a composite, and the composite is set to generate a bitmap image at the export, at the exit. But I don't want this. This flattens everything together. I want this composite just to gather the information, but pass the Z information. So I'll select pass through here. When I select pass through, you can see that the shape of the composite changes. So this tells me this is a pass-through composite. And now the character is going in front and behind of the different branches. Oh, and he has one right in his face. And as well, I haven't exposed the branches all the way to the end of my scene. So if I go here, you see that the branch disappears. So I'm going to find the branch inside my timeline, and I will expand or extend the duration by selecting the last frame and pressing F5, and this extend the duration of these. All right, so now I have branches. They're all laid out at specific Z depth. If I go in my perspective view, and I rotate my view, so this is a good way to see that I have a 3D environment with different Z depth. And I will have something. What startles my character? I'll need to bring this in. So it's a firefly. Very big firefly. There we go. And now I have a firefly. It's a little bit big, so I'll shrink it a little bit. And I'll move it outside of the camera frame because it's only going to appear. This branch is annoying. I need to take this branch away from his face. Oops. So I'll move that a bit like this. So there we go. And I can move this on all the frames in my scene by turning off the animation mode. When I turn off the animation mode, you see how it becomes red. This tells me that I will modify the position of this element for the whole duration of the scene and not just that specific frame. All right, so that's better. So now going back to my firefly, when should it come in? So maybe I'll move him closer to the edge of the screen, and right here at the end he will go all the way across. I'll display the path. So this is the path that the firefly is using. And I want the firefly to move on the Z-axis to be in front or behind of my character. Actually, I'll add some control points. So if I place my mouse over the spline, I can add control points to my spline. And these are not keyframes, so I can slide them in time. And I just use them to reshape the path that the firefly is using, is going through. And I'll go into top view, and I'll move this maybe forward like that, and backwards behind my character, and back forward here. So this is a really easy way of moving your stuff on the Z-axis. So you can see the firefly, I zoom in a little bit, going. The camera is moving, so I'll need to maybe make this closer here. Goes into frame, goes behind the character, and goes in front of the other branch. And out of. I moved the branch pretty far on the right, so let's see what this does. So now I have my character, my firefly, coming in, going behind my character, and flying through the flame. So he's going behind the character and coming in front. So maybe I should modify this a little bit. So while I'll do this, let's ask and see if there are any questions.
Yes, there are. So Matt wants to know, where are all the assets that you see created using only Toon Boom? Were all the assets created using Toon Boom, or were they done with other programs?
So yes, so everything inside this this project here, this scene here, were created in Harmony. Most of them are vector-based. Everything is vector-based except for the background, which is a bitmap image that was drawn inside Harmony as well.
Cool. Seth is asking, are you going to get into the light shading functionalities with Harmony 12? Can you make 2D look more like 3D?
Yeah, so we do have light shading inside Harmony, though I'm not sure I will have time to go over this. I'll try if I have. I think we already showed it a little bit in a previous webinar.
If you go to toonboom.com/webinars, about a month ago or a month and a half ago, we did do a webinar on light shading specifically, and the recording is online. So you can go there to see more. Do we have time for more questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so Gabriel wants to know, when the orc turns the staff stick out of the back of the hand, how do you mask the back under the hand?
Yes. So I could do the same trick that I did before using the cutter. Now, here's the. Maybe I could just change the order of the cables. No, that doesn't work. Damn it. Okay, so I would use the same trick. and actually pull out a copy of the hand, of that one hand, and composite it with the other hand to use as a cutter. It's funny that it does that because it usually doesn't do that. Let's look. You see, this is just actually an artifact of the OpenGL mode. So in OpenGL, we don't do everything exactly as how it will look like in the software render, because doing everything, all the composite operations would take too much time on the video card and would slow down the performance. So we optimize and we skip some parts. There's actually a preference that I can turn on if I want to see everything. It's under the OpenGL tab of the preferences, and it's called Enable Composite Pass-Through for All Effects. If I click on that, it should show me exactly the same result in OpenGL and in software render. So right now I'm in OpenGL, and in software render, I see exactly the same result. Though this takes a lot more CPU time, so I will turn this off. As long as I know and I'm aware of this, I can work with that, because I prefer having fast performance and not seeing the staff at the proper place.
Cool. So one more question, and the question is, will the project be available for us to tinker around in?
Yes, so we'll be able to share these assets on the webinar page.
Thank you. And just one last short question. Can you talk about the Z depth a little bit?
Yes.
There's been a couple of questions about that. So can you maybe talk about...
What are the specific questions?
So basically the specific questions are just people are looking for more examples of the Z depth a little bit. So maybe just do an overview.
Okay, okay. So, well, Harmony, even though it's at the base a 2D animation software, it really has a 3D engine behind to composite everything together. And it's been inside Harmony before, when it was Opus, and way back when it was US Animation, more than 20 years ago. It always had this Z-axis to be able to position stuff on the Z-axis and be able to do easy scene planning. So I have another scene that maybe I could show you that uses that. So let me just go and open Harmony here. I'm going to open a second instance of Harmony. And I will call this one, this is the planets one. All right, and let's go into the compositing, my library here. And I have, this is what I have. One thing I forgot to show you was the turbulence inside that scene. This is the, so I won't go through the process of creating the whole scene here. I will just import the finished version of the scene. And we'll show you how it was created. Now, so we have the Z-axis inside Harmony, and we've had the Z-axis for a long time in Harmony. One thing that is new since maybe, I don't know, 10 years or so, is the ability to rotate things on the 3 axes. So in the past, we were able to move stuff in front and behind on the Z-axis. Now we're also able to rotate stuff, but we've been able to do that since maybe version 7.5. So let me play back this scene here. And this is just a spaceship going through space, and you can see it's moving, getting bigger, getting smaller, and this is all done through using the Z-axis. So maybe I made my scene a bit longer. There we go. And if we look at the perspective view right here, we can see actually the scene, the whole scene. So it has, everything has been moved on the Z-axis at different depth, so that when the camera goes through the scene, everything moves at different speed. But you're also able to, if I select my go inside the group, where's the character? Just use the O key right here, and starship, starship, starship. I want to see the path. So where's the path? No name maybe. There we go. Here's the path. If we look at this in the perspective view, you can see how the peg moves on the Z-axis, on all the axes actually, and goes through the scene. One thing that's interesting with this scene is that we have this planet here, which is round, but also has some rings around it. Looking for my words in English. The rings are just a plain 2D drawing. So if I look at them in the drawing view, they're just like this. If I go in the camera view here and I rotate it, you see it was just rotated in 3D to be able to put the rings around the planet. If I do a software render, you'll see it'll look pretty good. This is how it looks rendered. So this is all the stuff you can do inside Harmony. You can even build rooms if you want. So you take 2D art, you can rotate them on the X or Y axis to build a room, to build furniture, to do whatever you want. And even further than that, you can import 3D models, but that's all another subject. Other questions?
So we're pretty okay for questions. There is one that we didn't answer. Are there previews of the special effects plugins?
Yeah. So so I went back to my scene here with my my orc. For example, the flame here, I don't see what it looks like in the final render, but I have a node that I can add that's called render preview. If I connect this under right here, this will generate a preview. And you see in my timeline, it's generating the preview, and it's filling my timeline with all the previewed, the rendered preview images. Let's just wait until it finishes. There we go. And now if let me add the mask here, if I play back my animation, you see a preview of the flame. I don't know if you can notice this through the webinar, through the internet, but the preview is not a full resolution preview. If I open the render preview node right here, I have the ability to select what is the quality of the preview. Is it half resolution? Right, starting from this back. Let me go to this front here. Is it full resolution? You can do a full resolution preview, but for sure that will take a lot more memory to preserve that in memory, but it will look a lot better. Wow. So yes, there is a way to preview your animation, your effects in OpenGL using the render preview. And this is especially useful if you're using effects that generate things like a turbulence noise generator, or maybe some effects from Sapphire where it generates éclair, lightning. You don't see them in OpenGL, but if you use the preview render, you'll be able to use it to see them. And now you see it's full resolution rendered inside the OpenGL preview.
Okay, so I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Matt was asking, can you show us perspective view?
Perspective view. So the perspective view is a view that I don't use a lot. It's very useful to see everything inside the 3D space where they are. If I want to see, for example, the path of my firefly, right here, I can enable the path. I can see the path of my firefly inside this view. And you see that I rotate the view around. I do this by pressing Command-Shift on my Mac keyboard. That would be Control-Shift on Windows. And this way you can see the path and really analyze where your character is going. And you can manipulate your character from here. So if I select the Firefly peg right here, you can still manipulate it from here. But this is, I always really like to see what it looks like in the camera view. So most of the time I'll just manipulate from here or from the top view. But yeah, you can do that from the perspective view as well. And just remember to rotate around, to navigate around, Command Shift or Control Shift on Windows.
Cool. So a couple people are still asking, and yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll have it online early next week. All our webinars are recorded, and then you can definitely go watch them again off our website. And the scene files for this webinar will also be online early next week. So you can check back in at toonboom.com/webinars, and you'll see everything there, and you can see what other webinars are also coming up. We have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to ask one or two more questions. Hopefully we can get these answers in. Once you are satisfied of seeing your preview, how can you turn it off?
I'm guessing you mean the render preview. You can just disable it like I did, or you can remove it from the table. If you're talking about the render preview that we have here, so when I click on the flower here, this renders the scene. It shows me exactly how it would look like in the final render. Let me remove that. You can just go back to OpenGL, between OpenGL and software render mode by clicking on those two buttons.
Cool. Another question comes about nodes. So, hi, is there a complete reference of all the nodes? Stefan wants to know.
Yes, so online on our site, if you go to toonboom.com, you will be able to access all our documentation, and there is a reference guide somewhere. I know them by heart, so I never go there. But let's say I'm looking for glow. I can just type in the search, the glow right here, and then I will have a description of the glow module, of the glow node, and all the different parameters that you can set for that node. And actually you have the list of all the other nodes available right there.
Good. So Kylie wants to know, can you place flat images on the XYZ axis in the 3D view to build a stage?
Yes, so as the rings on the planet were turned, you can also do that for the any other thing. You can take a flat drawing and rotate it to do a floor. You can take flat drawings and rotate them to build a room as well. Maybe that could be another good webinar where we talk about the 3D aspect, where you can use 2D assets to build 3D rooms, and also build using real 3D modules inside, characters inside models inside the project. Now, while we're talking, I'm doing my turbulence right here very quickly because I want to add some turbulence to my scene. So actually what I want is I want the water to be moving. Now everything, I've added the turbulence and this affects the whole scene. I just want to affect just kind of the water in the swamp. Maybe the frequency is a bit too low. I'll make it very high like this. It's too high. So what I did is I drew a mask for the water really quickly, like this, and I'll use a cutter to cut just that part. So very quickly, I'll just copy paste the cutter from here. Turbulence, and I'll use the mask, and I'll need to invert my cutter. There we go. And then grab another cable from my background, drag it behind, and now I have turbulence on the water. And there we go.
Very cool. So that brings us to our 1 hour webinar. We pretty much answered all the questions. If there are still questions that you guys may have, you guys can always email us at webinars@toonboom.com and we'll be happy to answer any further questions. So this ends today's webinar, and this webinar will also be online early next week, so you can go back and watch it again and pick up any extra cool tips that Marc-André gave us, because as always, he's amazing and he's the master at harmony. So again, thanks everybody, and Marc-André, thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Desi, for being such a great host. It's always a pleasure to work with you. All right, thank you everyone. Bye-bye. Until next time.